So a story that I was told when I was younger involves a young man who has a family that he deeply cares about. He has a deep love for his wife, and they have a son who is the object of their adoration and affection. And the situation comes about that this young man, his mother passes away, and their elderly father needs a place to go and stay, so he goes to stay in the home of his son, the young man. And the elderly father, he is so frail, he is so fragile that he needs constant care and attention. He needs someone to always meet his needs. It causes a lot of frustration, it causes a lot of commotion in their house. Then one night they sit down to eat their dinner, and this elderly man, he is so frail, he is so fragile that the sheer weight of the plate that he's holding in his hands is too much for him to handle. So it falls from his grasp onto the ground, shattering into pieces. The young man, his son, he can't take it any longer. And he unleashes all of his anxiety and all of his frustration on his father, saying that since you cannot eat with causing any problems, from now on you will no longer be able to eat from the same table as my wife, my son, and I. But you will have to eat at a table in the corner of the room by yourself. And since you can't eat off of the same plates that we eat off of, henceforth you will have to eat from a wooden bowl. And the elderly man, with a tear in his eyes, he goes and does what he is told. The next day now, this young man, he comes upon his own son. He comes upon his own child, and he sees him on the ground playing with some scraps of wood. And he wants to be with his son. He wants to play and participate in what his son is doing. So when he gets close enough to him, he says with a deep love and affection in his voice, "Oh, my child, what are you doing?" And the young boy, reciprocating the same love and affection for his father, looks to his father and says, "Oh, my father, I am making a wooden bowl for you to eat out of when you get older." We learn implicitly and explicitly, consciously and unconsciously, the I that is me today is most definitely impacted by every yesterday that I lived in this world. Every interaction that I was blessed to have, or every interaction that I was unfortunate enough to have, most definitely has shaped me to be the person that I am. The way that I see this world, the way that I see the people in this world is met not just by the presence of certain individuals, but also by the absence of certain individuals as well. And when we come together tonight in a way where we transcend difference, where we can look in the face of those who are motivated by racism, hatred, and bigotry, and say that our defining moments will not be by when we are apart, but how tonight, when true beauty shines forward, because we sit together in all of our glory as people who come from different faiths, different races, different ethnicities, different classes, to demonstrate that our unity will not be of a uniformity of the external, but it is of a unity that is of the internal, a unity of shared values and hearts. We want to be able to assess how that will then transcend from this room and go into a world that is in need of it. How you will take this gathering and you will bring it into your homes, you will bring it into your workplaces, you will bring it everywhere that it needs to be. And to assess that our ability to change the world around us starts with a need to look at the world that's inside of us. I've had the blessing of being able to sit with tens and thousands of people all over this world. People who come from every class, people who are heads of state, and I could tell you one of the people who impacted me most that I was blessed and privileged to meet was our current Pope, Pope Francis. When he came to the United States on his most recent visit, I was given the privilege of being able to speak alongside him at the Ground Zero site. And we spoke to an audience of about 400 people, city officials, celebrities, faith leaders, activists, 9/11 family members, but really to a global audience of millions, as the Pope can only uniquely command. And a lot of people ask me, what was it like to meet the Pope? It was interesting, for some reason, the question I got asked the most was, what did he smell like? I said, I don't know, he smelled good. What do you want me to tell you? I gave a lecture at Case Western University in Ohio a week after the Pope and I spoke together. There was a young woman there who asked me, what was it like to meet him? And I said, you know what was crazy? There was people who lined up for hours, not even to hear him speak, but just to watch his car drive by. People who had a deep relationship with their Catholicism, people who had a tangential relationship with their Catholicism, people who weren't even Catholic. They were just moved by his message. And I said, every message that he spoke on that entire trip was scripted. He was reading off of a paper. And the night before he and I spoke together at the Ground Zero site, he spoke in a well-known cathedral in New York City called St. Patrick's. There was about 3,000 people who were there, gathered hours before he came in, went through security. For many of them, this would be the highlight of their life. The night that not only they got to see the Pope, but they got to hear him. For some of them, they got to actually meet him, shake his hand, get a hug from him. A night that they would tell their children and their children's children, and anything that he would say that night, they would take as fact, they would take it as law. I said that night, the Pope decided to go off script. And before he started his remarks that were prepared for him, he first prayed for 700 Muslims who had died that morning while performing the Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca. And I said to that young woman in Ohio, why do you think he would do something like that? He's in New York City where the September 11th attacks took place. The relationship between Muslim community and governmental apparatus, law enforcement, is tenuous at best. No one would have faulted him had he not done it. They wouldn't have said, we can't believe you didn't pray for those Muslims. He simply did it because he felt it was the right thing to do. This is a man who chooses to eat with the homeless rather than politicians. A man who asked his global constituency to take in Syrian refugees when much of the world's leaders, including people in our country, still to this day look for whatever reason to keep them out. A man who understands his existence as being much bigger than he himself, or to be egocentric in any way, and has the ability to touch hearts, but to be motivated to do right simply because it's the right thing to do. And when you juxtapose that example to realities of leaders that live in the world today, individuals who are so motivated by racism and bigotry and hatred, literally people vying for the highest office in this country who have no qualms whatsoever, building campaigns off of the vilification of every minority popular. But now when you have that spectrum, you and I have to ask ourselves, where do we want to lie within it? And our hearts have to be the starting point. Because you can come together tonight, 700 strong. But what is it going to take to have you come together tomorrow? What is it going to take when you read the same news that I read and you wonder if it's new news or old news? Why do our hearts not command the rest of our bodies, our being, to stand upright and scream with a sense of righteous anger every time one of our black brothers and sisters are shot in the streets? Why do we find ourselves in a place where it necessitates seeing the body of deceased Syrian boys and girls wash upon the shores of lands far and far away for us to take a breath to say, what's really going on there? And then after weeks pass, we forget, and it necessitates seeing another young boy be pulled from the rubble of homes with blood caked on his face from wounds that were initially gushing out blood. For us to wonder, yet again, what's taking place. Our organs of sensory perception are not limited to the eyes that we see with, the hands that we touch with, the tongues that we taste with, the minds that we think with. But you have hearts that are organs of primary cognition within you, that you carry inside of yourself perspectives of the other. And until we address fully what it is that exists within us, we're not going to be able to take on the world that's around us. Do you get what I'm saying? I'll give you an example. I spoke at MIT some time ago. This is an audience that was probably this size, and afterwards a lot of people came up to me and they said, "You spoke really great. That was so inspirational and charismatic. You were wonderful." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And then a young woman came up to me and she said, "My sister's a big fan of yours. Can I introduce her to you?" And I said, "Sure." And she walked arm in arm with her younger sister because her sister was blind. She couldn't see. And we talked for a bit, went back and forth, and towards the end of our conversation, this young woman who was blind, she said to me, "You know, I thought you'd be a lot taller." I said, "What?" And she said, "Your voice, it's not coming from up here. It's coming from down here." One of my students from NYU was with me, and he said, "Wow, isn't that amazing? She can't even see, and she could tell how short you are." And outside, I said, "Oh yeah, that's so great." And inside, I'm thinking, man, how short am I? A blind woman just told me I'm short. She didn't need eyes to see with. Do you get what I'm saying? And a lot of times we take the most simplistic understandings of the world around us because all we're looking at are things with our eyes, not with our hearts. And we get to a place where we have full capacity, full ability to go out and do what we have the means to do, but we validate and justify not doing because the hand that extends a hand to mine is not of the same skin color. It's not of the same race or ethnicity. It's not attached to a body that professes the same belief or convictions. It's not attached to a body that comes from the same country of origin or speaks the same language. I'm not worried about the people who find themselves in dire straits and situations. I would ask you as my brothers and sisters, what does it say of our hearts that we see oppression, injustice, and inequity take place in front of our eyes and we don't do anything about it? Will it necessitate that it comes into our homes, into our families before we wonder why no one else is standing? And how do we move in a way where we embody real goodness for the truest sense of it? The building of tonight necessitates understanding that as individuals, our strength will move forward when we start to build institutions that embody the vibe of love and compassion that's in this room. The systemic mechanisms that seek to hold down underrepresented minorities in this country will only be challenged if we meet them face to face with institutions as well. And that means we have to put in strategy, we have to put in wealth. It's beautiful that we came together 700 strong. For every one of you that's here, you have access to 10, if not 100, if not 1,000 more. And collectively, our voices can permeate into actions that would allow for us to ensure that at least in our local cities, there will be no inequity whatsoever. But you got to think about it from the inside. And understand that on a policy level, there's problems, man. I'll give you an example of what it is that I don't mean. I took about 20 of my students to have lunch at a street cart in New York City near our center. And while we're waiting for the food to come, there's a middle-aged Caucasian woman standing behind us. She's trying to push her way through the group, saying, "Excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. Don't you understand what I'm saying?" And when she gets to the front of the line, she looks at me face to face and she says, "Oh, I guess you can't understand what I'm saying. How do they say excuse me where you come from?" And I said, "We say excuse me." And she said, No, the place where your family is from, how do they say excuse me there? And I said, we're from Jersey, and we say excuse me. She couldn't understand how somebody that looks like this is actually from this place. And that's problematic in and of itself. The realities that many individuals face, because all we can understand of them are our stereotypes of them, yield the realities that they yield. But now when that mindset finds itself present at a table where it's making decisions about minority populations and how they will live their lives without the physical presence or the voice of those populations, and instead only our worst stereotypes of them, we see the policies enacted that are enacted. I work as a chaplain for the New York City Police Department. By rank, I'm an inspector. It's a fairly high rank, one rank below a one-star chief. And one of the things that we do as police chaplains every year is attend the Ground Zero Memorial Service on September 11th. We have breakfast at police headquarters. We go down to the Ground Zero site and participate in the memorial. On the 9th anniversary of the attacks, Vice President Biden was there. And the current memorial structure that is built was still being constructed, so the ceremony was a little bit more closed off. You had a stage where everything took place from. In front of the stage, there was a VIP area for city officials, family members, and others. Behind us, a press pit for the media to come and watch. And behind them, an area for the public to come. So I'm standing in my police uniform, an inspector's uniform. I still have my beard. I'm still wearing my skull cap. I'm talking to people. We're waiting for things to start. And 3 men approach me wearing suits. And they say Secret Service has spotted you from the top of a building. They want us to check your credentials just in case. I said, just in case what? And they said, we're sorry that we're doing this to you. I said, then why are you doing it? And to be able to understand what they question in that moment is not merely my physical presence at that location, but the entire validity of my emotion tied to that space. Where I was an undergrad at New York University on September 11th in 2001. I stood with about 12,000 of my classmates in the middle of our campus in a park known as Washington Square as we watched the second plane fly into the towers. I had media from all over the world who was putting microphones in our face because they wanted to know, what do Muslims really think right now? And we were arguably the closest Muslim group to the Ground Zero site. We had to deal with a lot of backlash. Somebody tried to push me down a staircase. Acts of vandalism, acts of physical abuse, and it wasn't in a vacuum. I stood at numerous funerals for people of my faith and other walks of life who died on that day. So much of the work that I do until today is informed by the atrocities of that day. And in that moment, those men are questioning the validity of all of it. And the frustrating thing isn't that I'm going through it. But the frustrating thing is, what can I really do about it? If I was to say anything in return, it would make the situation that much more worse for me. And so where I could not speak, and there was hundreds of people watching, and they did not say anything, there was a mother standing next to me who lost her son on September 11th. And she said to those men that what you are doing right now is more dishonoring to the memory of our loved ones that we lost on that day than anything else. That here this young man is standing with us in our moment of need, and you're making it seem as if he's doing something wrong just because he's Muslim. And as easily as they had taken the validation away, she brought it right back. I share that with you for a few reasons. Primarily, what you want to be able to understand is that somebody sitting somewhere concocted a policy that trickled down to these men that say, if you see someone that looks like this, look at them again. I'm wearing a police uniform, man. And even if I wasn't, it still wouldn't be okay. And you try to understand the policies that are enacted that are oppressive to so many populations in this country. Undocumented immigrants, the realities that are faced by people who are differently able. There are literally schools that are built in this country that serve as feeders into the prison system for our brothers and sisters of the African American community. There is without consequence anything to perpetrators of violence that are taking place against them as they get shot in the streets. You want to be able to understand that that exists on a systemic level. And it's really easy to forget those systems are in place when the people come and they take pictures with us. And they come and they celebrate certain things with us. Or they give us the guise of providing for us when in reality all that they're giving is what we were entitled to in the first place. Now, if anyone was to ask me if I would go through it all over again, I would tell you, yes, I would. And I'm saying this to you, man, as somebody who has sat close enough to the Pope to tell you what he could smell like. I've shared the stage with people like the Dalai Lama. I've met with President Obama on numerous occasions, his senior staff. I still have the FBI visit me on my home. And when they've come after numerous occasions, I'll ask them, what is it that you really want from me? And they say that you're just too good to be true. Know that we have our eyes on you. Getting on and off of planes is not a fun experience. I've been surveilled, profiled, detained. I'm still telling you that if I was to stand in a certain place, such as any of those, I'd continue to do so. Because if my standing is going to make it easier for someone who comes later, if my standing will yield understanding for populations that I might not get to see, but it'll happen a generation removed, then I'm going to continue to do it. For certain battles to be won, those battles have to take place in the first place. You can't win at something if you're just standing and watching it take place. The reality is such that you might be the only one that's speaking. You might be the only one that's standing. But if your standing ignites within people an urgency to get up and stand as well, then go and put yourself outside of your comfort zone for the sake of populations that are waiting for us to do for them. What are you doing in terms of building with the network that you have? The domestic violence shelters that serve Michigan across the state, the free clinics, the political advocacy groups, the legal advocacy groups. What is it that you are doing that says tonight we celebrate 30 years, 3 decades from now when somebody else is sitting in the seat that you're sitting in, who are they going to be honoring for what you built in your legacy 30 years from now? With a mindfulness that there are realities and experiences that are distinct from your own. And most importantly, when you think about what it means to be a good person, a person that knows how to build bridges, a person who knows what their values are and what guides them, don't think of somebody wretched like me, but think about that woman, that mother, who as she stood with me, she did the right thing just because it was the right thing to do. She recognized and understood in that moment both her power and her privilege, and how she could leverage it to be somebody who serves someone who was underserved and underprivileged. Who in their right mind is going to say something to a mother who lost her son on September 11th as she stands at the ground zero site on the anniversary of September 11th? And she knew that. And she understood it. And she used what she had to do good just because it was the right thing to do. That's pluralism. That's being able to understand. The diversity in and of itself is not an achievement. We didn't play a role in making us all different from each other. But we play a role definitively in how we will harness that which is around us and turn it into what it is, real beauty. Look inside yourself and ask yourself, what do you honestly think of those that are different from you? When you eat a meal at your home, the dinner table, the faces that are sitting around it, how often are those faces different from your face? In terms of the color of their skin, in terms of the texture of their hair, in terms of the convictions that they espouse, the religions that they adhere to, the spirituality that resonates with them. How often are you bringing diversity in a very real way? And how often are you just holding close to something that you believe is going to escape from you if you somehow just start to engage with those that are different from you? And it's hard, but what we miss up on is immense opportunity for real gain and real blessing by engaging those that are different from us, by yielding to the idea that we haven't gone through everything that everybody else has gone through, and that the only way that we will be motivated and mobilized is by having gone through what someone else has gone through in order to understand it. And may God protect us from ever having to feel hunger in order to understand what it's like to be hungry. May He protect us from having to feel real thirst in order to understand what it's like to have no water, to live in the cold winter with no warmth, no shelter, no roofs over our head, to understand what it's like to call the streets our place of residence. To not be so myopic in our perspective, or to be so simplistic in the way that we engage by saying that my experiences alone will dictate for me what this world is and truly how it is that people live in it. Be bold enough and courageous enough to go and stand with those that are different from you, rather than waiting for them to come and stand with you. There is no shortage of realities that we find taking place in the world around us today. You just got to take a look inside that most important part of you and really ask yourself, what is it that you hold of the people around you? You can't give anything that you don't have in the first place. So if you have pain, you will give pain. If you have hate, you will give hate. If you have confusion, you will give confusion. If you have love, you will give love. If you have mercy, you will give mercy. If you have hope, you will give hope. If I can be helpful to any of you in any of what it is that you have going on, please don't hesitate in reaching out. It would be an honor and a privilege to be able to help you in doing whatever it is that you do. And if this is the only moment that we are meant to be together, then I pray, inshallah ta'ala, God willing, that God gathers us all together again in the best of places in the world beyond this one. Don't underestimate the impact that you can have. Even if it's just on one heart, make sure that you use whatever it is that you have to go out and make that difference. So I'll end with two stories that have been quite impactful on me, and I hope that they will be impactful on you. In the Indian subcontinent, there was a great philosopher and scholar by the name of Iqbal. Some of you probably know him. And Iqbal, he received numerous honors, numerous awards and accolades, wrote many books and had many degrees. And he got to a point where they wanted to actually bestow knighthood upon him. When they sought to give him that honor, he said that, I need for you to give it to my Quran teacher from when I was a younger child. And they said to him that, we don't know who your teacher is. Can you tell us something about him? What has he written? What are his books? And Iqbal says, I am his book. We are written in each other's stories. We have a presence in each other's chapters. How we move forward in the writing of our collective narrative will necessitate individual decision on your part. And I can tell you, man, there's always been people who have been hateful and bigoted, but there's always been people who will speak out against it. And where we find ourselves today, and I'm speaking to you as someone who comes from New York City, where in the last weeks alone, 2 imams have been shot point blank in the back of their heads in broad daylight as they left from their mosques. A 60-year-old woman in Queens stabbed in her torso, and she succumbed to the wounds. Women strolling in Brooklyn with their babies, and people assaulting and attacking them on the streets. There was a woman who was lit on fire in Midtown Manhattan. And you can talk about the people who perpetrated against them, but try to also understand that who was there that was really speaking out against the injustice? Who was there who was sharing their voices? And so where you can impact even one, impact it. And so a final story that I'll end, the last of the two, involves a young man who was a known author in his community. And to gain inspiration for his work, he would go out in nature to just reflect and contemplate. And one day he is walking on the shore of a beach and he sees a figure in the distance that intrigues him. It looks like it's doing some kind of dance. So he walks closer to it, and when he gets closer, he sees that it's not dancing, but it seems to be throwing something into the water off the ground. And when he gets even closer, he sees that on the shore there are thousands and thousands of starfish, and there's a little boy that's seemingly throwing them into the water. So when he gets close enough, he asks the boy, "What are you doing?" The boy says, "I'm throwing the fish into the water." And the man says to him, "Why are you doing this?" And he says that they washed up onto the shore with the tide, and if I don't do so, they will dehydrate. They'll lose all of their water, and they will surely die. And the man, he looks up and down the coast, and all he sees is fish upon fish. He looks to the boy, and he says, "There are so many of them, there is no way you're going to be able to get all of them back into that water. What is the point of what you are doing? What difference will it make?" The young boy, he looks at the man. He looks down at the ground. He picks up one of the fish, throws it into the water, and says it made a difference to that one. You can impact even one. Don't let it go. Allow for yourself to be bold enough to beseech the divine to make you the answer to people's prayers, to put you in such a place where you ask of him to make you the reason that people have hope in this world and never the reason that people might dread it. And again, if this is the only time that we are meant to be together, then I pray to the Almighty that we are all gathered together again in the best of places in the world beyond this one. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and protect us. May he bless us with knowledge that benefits us. May he bless us with the tawfiq to understand and implement that knowledge into our daily lives. And may he guide and bless us all. Wallahu ta'ala alam wa billahi tawfiq. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.